Nova-Max Penitentiary floated in the absolute void between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies, a gleaming titanium alloy fortress designed for one purpose, containing the most dangerous being the United Galactic Alliance had ever encountered. From a distance, it resembled a massive geometric snowflake, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces, with a single red warning beacon pulsing at its center. "Welcome to nowhere," announced the automated shuttle system as Warden Thaddeus Fletcher stared out the viewport at his domain. "Current prisoner count, 1. Fletcher sighed and rubbed his temples, 15 years managing the most expensive prison in known space, and all for a single inmate. The budget committee was constantly breathing down his neck about resource allocation and cost efficiency. But they hadn't met Prisoner Zero. They hadn't seen what he could do. Most beings in the galaxy knew him only as the omnivorous obliterator, a human whose appetite defied all natural laws. The classified reports used terms like molecular deconstruction and matter conversion, but the witnesses, the few who survived, simply said he ate people. Not just people. Ships, weapons, entire buildings. Fletcher remembered the security footage from the Centauri Peace Summit. 1 minute, Ambassador Krill and his entire 12-being delegation were presenting their opening statements. The next, a rather unassuming human male in the audience stood up, unhinged his jaw to an impossible degree, and, well, the technical term was consumed, but that didn't quite capture the horror of what happened. Prisoner status report. Fletcher commanded the AI system as he entered the central monitoring hub. "Prisoner Zero remains in containment," replied the disembodied voice. "Biometric readings stable. No anomalous activity detected in the past 24 standard hours." "And the null field?" "Operating at 99.8% efficiency." Fletcher nodded. The null field was the only thing keeping Prisoner Zero contained a quantum barrier that prevented matter manipulation on a subatomic level. Without it, their single inmate would simply eat his way through the station's walls and disappear into the void, probably snacking on a few solar systems on his way home. "Sir," called one of the monitoring technicians, "the supply shuttle is arriving, and it's carrying our new personnel rotation." Fletcher groaned. New staff meant new training, new security clearances, and inevitably, new people who didn't believe the warnings until it was almost too late. "Right," he said, straightening his uniform. "Let's go welcome the fresh meat." He immediately regretted his choice of words. The airlock cycled open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a motley collection of beings that constituted Nova-Max's newest staff members. At the front stood a young human male with an eager expression that made Fletcher's stomach turn. "Security Officer Daniel Quasar reporting for duty, sir." The kid practically vibrated with enthusiasm, offering a salute that was about 3 decades out of regulation. "At ease, officer," Fletcher muttered. "And it's just Warden or Fletcher. We don't do the military thing here." Behind Quasar stood the new medical officer, a tall Lunarian with silvery skin that seemed to catch every light in the room. Dr. Lumi Starlight had an impressive resume, 3 doctorates in xenobiology, quantum physics, and something called transdigestive forensics, that Fletcher hadn't even known existed until her application crossed his desk. "Dr. Starlight," Fletcher nodded. "I've read your papers on molecular decomposition. That's partly why you're here." The Lunarian smiled, her skin rippling slightly with what Fletcher recognized as their species' version of pleasure. "I've studied the Obliterator case extensively, Warden. His abilities defy conventional science. I'm eager to observe him firsthand." "Yeah, well, observation is all you'll be doing," Fletcher growled. "Standard protocol, no direct contact, no samples, and absolutely no experiments." The remaining new arrivals included 2 mechanoid maintenance techs, a chlorovore botanist for the station's oxygen gardens, and a quantum telepath communication specialist. All standard roles for a prison that normally housed thousands of the galaxy's worst criminals, except Nova-Max hadn't seen another prisoner since Prisoner Zero arrived. "Follow me to orientation," Fletcher said, leading them down the gleaming corridor. First rule of Nova-Max, what happens here stays here. Second rule, don't talk to the prisoner. Third rule, seriously, don't talk to the prisoner. Is he really that dangerous? Asked Quasar, jogging slightly to keep up with Fletcher's brisk pace. I mean, the files say he's just one human. No cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications. Just a guy who eats things? Fletcher stopped so abruptly that Quasar nearly collided with him. 3 years ago, Officer Quasar, we had a guard who thought just like you. Got curious. Started chatting with Prisoner Zero during night shifts. You know what happened? Quasar shook his head. Prisoner Zero talked him into opening the food slot an extra inch. Just an inch. Do you know what he can do with an inch? Fletcher's eye twitched. We found the guard's badge. Just his badge. Nothing else. Not a drop of blood, not a scrap of uniform, not a single strand of DNA. Gone. The orientation room resembled a lecture hall, with tiered seating facing a large holographic projector. As the new staff settled in, Fletcher dimmed the lights and activated the system. This is classified security level Omega, he announced. What you're about to see never leaves this room. The hologram flickered to life, showing surveillance footage from what appeared to be a diplomatic function. Well-dressed beings of various species mingled in an ornate chamber. Centauri Peace Summit, 5 years ago, Fletcher narrated. Watch the human in the blue suit, center left. The footage zoomed in on an unremarkable human male, average height, brown hair, pleasant but forgettable features. Then, without warning, the man's jaw distended like a snake's, his mouth opening to an anatomically impossible degree. What followed made even Dr. Starlight gasp. Holy cosmic crap, whispered Quasar, his face pale. He consumed 78 beings in under 2 minutes, Fletcher continued as the hologram showed chaos erupting. Including the entire hive mind delegation, which technically counted as one entity but consisted of 6,000 specialized drones. Dr. Starlight leaned forward, her scientific curiosity evidently overriding her horror. The molecular breakdown appears instantaneous. Is there any waste product? None that we've ever detected, Fletcher replied. He converts matter to energy with 100% efficiency. The laws of physics take a vacation when Prisoner Zero gets hungry. But why? Asked Quasar. What does he want? Fletcher shut down the hologram. That, Officer Quasar, is the billion-credit question. In 5 years of containment, he's never made demands, never requested anything beyond standard rations. He just sits in his cell, occasionally smiles at the cameras, and waits. Dr. Starlight raised her hand slightly. I'd like to review all the medical data you've collected. Granted, Fletcher nodded. But remember observation only. As the orientation concluded, Fletcher couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that always came with new personnel. Someone always got curious, someone always broke protocol, and sometimes people disappeared. One last thing, Fletcher announced as they prepared to leave. If the alarms ever sound, don't be heroes. Run to the emergency shuttles and evacuate. Because if Prisoner Zero ever gets loose, this sector of space becomes a no-go zone for the next 1,000 years. Danny Quasar was 3 weeks into his assignment at Nova-Max, and he was bored out of his mind. His security route took him past Prisoner Zero's cell exactly twice per shift, and despite the warden's warnings, curiosity was getting the better of him. The cell itself was unremarkable, a cube of reinforced transparent aluminum, surrounded by the shimmering blue haze of the null field. Inside sat a perfectly ordinary-looking human male, currently reading what appeared to be an ancient paper book. That's new, Danny muttered, checking his datapad. No records indicated the prisoner had been given reading material. Hey, where'd you get the book? The prisoner looked up slowly, his eyes disconcertingly normal. No red glow, no vertical pupils, just brown eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. "I made it," he replied, his voice surprisingly pleasant. "I've been saving my food rations. The paper is processed nutrition bars, the binding is made from the protein paste they serve on Tuesdays, and the ink is, well, you don't want to know about the ink." Danny knew he should report this immediately. Matter manipulation was supposed to be impossible inside the null field, but curiosity won out. "What are you reading?" The prisoner held up the crude book. "I'm writing, actually, my memoirs." "Would you like to hear how I ended up here?" "You ate a peace delegation," Danny replied flatly. The prisoner chuckled. "That's the headline version, yes. But did anyone ever tell you why?" Danny hesitated. This was exactly the kind of conversation the warden had warned against. But the prisoner seemed so normal, harmless, even. "The Centauri delegates weren't what they appeared to be," the prisoner continued, setting his book aside. "Did you know that the hive mind species has been infiltrating galactic governments for centuries? Each drone appears autonomous, but they're all connected to a central consciousness with rather unsavory plans for the rest of us." "That sounds like conspiracy garbage," Danny scoffed. "Does it?" The prisoner stood and approached the transparent wall. "Check the classified files on the Proxima Centauri colony collapse. Authorization code Omega-3 Delta 7. Then we'll talk." Before Danny could respond, an alarm blared throughout the station, red emergency lights pulsing in sync with the deafening noise. "Warning, unauthorized vessels approaching. All personnel to battle stations." "This is not a drill." Danny's comm unit crackled to life with the warden's voice. "All security teams to defensive positions. We have multiple bogies on approach, not responding to hails." The prisoner returned to his bunk, picked up his book, and resumed reading as if nothing was happening. "Right on schedule," he murmured. In the command center, Fletcher was facing a nightmare scenario. But the tactical display showed 15 vessels of unknown configuration rapidly approaching Nova-Max, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Alliance database. "Status report." He barked as Dr. Starlight rushed in, her silvery skin now pale with stress. "They're not responding to any known communication protocols," reported the communications officer. "But they're broadcasting something on all frequencies, some kind of audio signal." "Let's hear it," Fletcher ordered. The speakers crackled before filling the room with a harsh, mechanical voice. "Surrender the Devourer to the Vortex Collective. Non-compliance will result in total annihilation." Fletcher exchanged a glance with Dr. Starlight. "They're here for prisoner 0. "How would they even know he's here?" she asked. "This facility is classified beyond top secret." Before Fletcher could speculate, the station rocked violently as the first volley of weapons fire struck Nova-Max's outer defenses. "Shields at 87% and dropping," announced the defense systems officer. "Their weapons are, sir, they're using some kind of matter disintegration technology. The shields won't hold against sustained fire." Fletcher felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Matter disintegration. Just like Prisoner Zero's abilities, but weaponized. This couldn't be coincidence. "Get me a secure line to Alliance Command," he ordered. "And someone find Officer Quasar. He was scheduled for prisoner monitoring duty." "Sir," called one of the security techs, "you need to see this." The main screen switched to the surveillance feed from Prisoner Zero's cell, where Danny Quasar stood much too close to the transparent barrier, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with the prisoner. "Damn it." Fletcher slammed his fist on the console. "Lock down that sector now." Nova-Max shuddered as another barrage of weapons fire slammed into its defensive shields. In the secure conference room adjacent to the command center, Warden Fletcher faced the most difficult decision of his career. "Let me get this straight," he said, glaring at the holographic representation of Admiral Vox, head of Alliance Security. "You want me to use Prisoner 0 as a weapon against these invaders?" "The Vortex Collective has destroyed 3 outposts and 2 science vessels in the past month," Admiral Vox replied, her tentacled face grim. Their technology matches nothing in our database, and conventional weapons barely scratch their hulls. We need an unconventional solution. Dr. Starlight, who had been invited to the emergency meeting due to her expertise on the prisoner, raised a slender hand. With all due respect, Admiral, we're talking about releasing an entity that could potentially be more dangerous than the invaders. We don't know if we could control him once he's outside containment. Which is why we've prepared this, the Admiral responded, transmitting a file to Fletcher's terminal. Quantum tether technology. It creates an unbreakable link between two objects, or in this case, between Prisoner Zero and a control device. Fletcher scanned the specifications with growing unease. This hasn't been field tested. We don't have time for field tests, Warden, snapped the Admiral. The Vortex Collective will breach your station within the hour. Deploy the asset or prepare to be overrun. After the Admiral's image flickered out, Fletcher turned to Dr. Starlight. Thoughts? I think we're making a deal with a demon, she replied softly. But I also think we're out of options. Meanwhile, in the lockdown area containing Prisoner Zero's cell, Danny Quasar was having a revelation. So you're saying you're not actually eating anyone, he said, staring at the prisoner with newfound fascination. You're sending them somewhere else? Dimensional relocation, the prisoner corrected with a small smile. Very different from eating, though I understand the confusion. The mouth unhinging thing is admittedly dramatic, but it creates the necessary space-time aperture. But why make everyone think you're some kind of monster? The prisoner's eyes darkened slightly. Because sometimes, Officer Quasar, the galaxy needs monsters. Especially when facing worse monsters. Their conversation was interrupted as the cell block door slid open, revealing Warden Fletcher, Dr. Starlight, and 4 heavily armed security officers. Officer Quasar, step away from the cell immediately, Fletcher ordered, his voice tight with controlled fury. Danny backed away as ordered, though not before catching the prisoner's subtle wink. Fletcher approached the transparent barrier, holding up a small device that resembled a metallic collar. We have a proposition for you. The prisoner set aside his handmade book and stood. The Vortex Collective has arrived, I take it? Fletcher's surprise was evident. You knew they were coming? They've been hunting me for a very long time, Warden, the prisoner replied calmly. I'm actually impressed it took them this long to track me here. Your security protocols are quite good. Dr. Starlight stepped forward. If you help us repel this invasion, the Alliance is prepared to offer you certain accommodations. The prisoner laughed, a genuinely amused sound that made everyone except Danny tense up. I don't want accommodations, Doctor. I want a shuttle. Absolutely not, Fletcher began, but another violent impact rocked the station, nearly knocking them off their feet. Shields at 31%, announced the station's AI. Breach imminent in sectors 7 through 12. The prisoner pressed his palm against the transparent barrier. Time's running out, Warden. A shuttle, fully fueled with navigation systems intact. In return, I'll remove your vortex problem. And how do we know you won't just escape? Fletcher demanded. No. The prisoner's expression turned serious. Because if I wanted to escape, I would have done so years ago. The null field doesn't work on me, it never did. I've been staying here voluntarily. Fletcher's face drained of color. That's impossible. Is it? The prisoner smiled. Check your surveillance records from my first night here. I reorganized my cell furniture while your night shift was taking a coffee break. The cameras caught it, but nobody noticed because nobody was looking for it. Fletcher turned to Dr. Starlight, who was already accessing the records on her datapad. Her eyes widened. He's telling the truth. Another impact, more violent than before. Shields at 22%, intoned the AI. Tick-tock, Warden, said the prisoner softly. Do we have a deal? Fletcher looked from the prisoner to the quantum tether collar in his hand, then back to the prisoner's eerily calm face. With a grimace, he made his decision. "Deactivate the null field," he ordered. As the shimmering blue haze of the null field dissipated, Prisoner Zero stepped out of his cell for the first time in 5 years, rolling his shoulders as if waking from a long nap. "That feels better," he said pleasantly. "Now, shall we go greet our visitors?" Fletcher held up the quantum tether collar. "One more thing. The prisoner eyed the device with amusement. "That won't work on me, but if it makes you feel better," he leaned forward, allowing Fletcher to fasten the collar around his neck. The device beeped once, indicating activation. "This way," Fletcher said, leading the unusual procession prisoner, warden, doctor, and confused security officer toward the main docking bay, where the Vortex Collective would most likely breach the station. "I still don't understand," Danny whispered to Dr. Starlight as they hurried through the corridors. "If he could escape any time, why stay?" "Protection, perhaps," she replied quietly. "Even predators need safe places to hide sometimes." The docking bay was a scene of frantic preparation. Security teams had established barricades behind which they crouched with weapons ready, though the tension in their postures suggested they knew conventional arms would be useless against the invaders. A massive circular section of the outer hull began to glow red, then white, as the Vortex Collective's cutting beam sliced through Nova-Max's reinforced bulkheads. "Everyone back," Fletcher ordered, pulling Dr. Starlight behind a support column. Only the prisoner remained in the open, standing calmly with his hands clasped behind his back as the cut section of hull crashed to the floor, the depressurization alarms blaring until emergency force fields snapped into place around the breach. Through the newly created entrance marched a line of figures that barely qualified as humanoid. Each stood over 7 feet tall, their bodies composed of constantly shifting metallic segments that flowed like liquid mercury, but occasionally forming appendages before reabsorbing them. "The Devourer," announced the lead figure, its face a blank silver oval that rippled when it spoke. "You will be reclaimed." "Hello, old friends," Prisoner Zero replied cheerfully. "You're looking well. New chassis. Very shiny. Your attempt at humor is irrelevant. You belong to the collective." "See, that's where you're wrong." The prisoner began walking toward the invaders, utterly fearless. "I don't belong to anyone." From behind the barricade, Danny watched in fascination as the prisoner approached the towering metal beings. "Shouldn't we do something?" he whispered to Fletcher. "Wait," the warden replied, his knuckles white where he gripped the quantum tether control unit. The lead vortex being reached for Prisoner Zero with an elongated limb that morphed into a gleaming claw. "Resistance is—" It never finished the sentence. The prisoner's jaw unhinged with that same impossible elasticity they'd seen in the security footage, his mouth expanding to a cavernous void that defied anatomy. But instead of lunging forward to engulf the invader, he simply exhaled. A wave of shimmering energy pulsed from his open mouth, washing over the vortex beings. Where it touched them, their liquid metal bodies began to crystallize, the flowing mercury texture hardening into brittle, faceted structures that cracked and crumbled as they tried to move. "What's happening?" Danny gasped as Dr. Starlight furiously recorded data on her pad. "He's altering their molecular structure," she replied, her voice tense with excitement. "Converting their semi-fluid metal state into a crystalline lattice that can't maintain cohesion. It's brilliant." "You cannot defeat the collective," insisted the lead being, though its voice had taken on a strained, crackling quality as its body slowly crystallized. "We are eternal. We are legion." "And I," replied the prisoner, closing his mouth to a more human configuration, "am hungry." What followed was simultaneously fascinating and horrifying. The prisoner moved among the immobilized vortex beings with the casual grace of a diner at a buffet, selectively consuming crystallized pieces of their bodies. With each bite, the invaders diminished, their protests becoming weaker until they were reduced to nothing but glittering dust on the docking bay floor. When it was over, the prisoner turned back to the stunned Nova-Max personnel, delicately wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I believe that concludes our business, Warden. About that shuttle." Fletcher fumbled with the quantum tether control, pressing the activation button repeatedly. Nothing happened. "I did mention it wouldn't work," the prisoner said with a small shrug. "But you've kept your word, so I'll keep mine. One Vortex collective fleet eliminated." "Not eliminated," Dr. Starlight corrected, stepping forward despite Fletcher's attempt to hold her back. "Relocated. That's what you do, isn't it? You don't digest what you consume, you send it somewhere else." The prisoner's eyebrows rose in appreciation. "Very good, Doctor. I knew you were the clever one." "Where do you send them?" She pressed. "Let's just say there's a pocket dimension that's getting rather crowded with various unpleasant entities that threatened galactic peace." He tapped the quantum tether collar, which fell open with a soft click. "Now, about my ride." The Situation Room was uncomfortably silent as Alliance Command digested Warden Fletcher's report. On the main view screen, Admiral Vox's tentacles writhed in what might have been agitation or deep thought. "Let me be absolutely clear," she finally said. "You provided an escape vessel to the most dangerous being in Alliance custody because he claimed to be, what? Some kind of interdimensional garbage disposal?" Fletcher winced. "The evidence supports his assertion, Admiral. Dr. Starlight's analysis of the residual energy signatures matches known quantum displacement patterns." Dr. Starlight stepped into frame, her silvery skin glowing with excitement. "His abilities aren't digestive, they're transportative. He creates micro-wormholes through an as-yet unexplained biological mechanism, sending harmful entities to a containment dimension." "And you believed this?" "We confirmed it," Fletcher replied. "Before his departure, he regurgitated a diplomatic delegation we thought had been consumed 5 years ago. They're a bit confused about where they've been, but otherwise unharmed." The Admiral's tentacles went still. Why would he maintain this charade of being a monster? Danny Quasar, who had been standing nervously at the back of the room, cleared his throat. "Permission to speak, Admiral?" Fletcher shot him a warning look, but the Admiral nodded. "He told me that sometimes the galaxy needs monsters," Danny said. I think he lets people believe he eats his enemies because it's more effective as a deterrent. The Vortex knew exactly what he could do to them, and they still feared him." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "And now this deterrent is loose in my galaxy." "With all due respect, Admiral," Dr. Starlight interjected, "he was never contained. He stayed at Nova-Max by choice, possibly as protection from entities like the Vortex Collective. The fact that he remained here for 5 years without incident suggests he's not a threat to the Alliance. Unless you're planning to invade peaceful worlds or consume sentient species," Fletcher added dryly. The briefing concluded with the Admiral ordering enhanced monitoring of the sector and putting the Alliance fleet on alert, but there was little else they could do. Prisoner Zero, or whatever his real name was, had vanished into the vastness of space. Later, as Fletcher was cleaning out his office in preparation for the inevitable reassignment, losing the galaxy's most valuable prisoner tended to be a career-limiting move, Danny knocked on his door. "Sir? There's something you should see." Fletcher followed the young officer to the now empty cell that had housed their infamous prisoner for 5 years. On the bunk lay the crude handmade book. "He left it behind," Danny explained. I think it's for us." Fletcher picked up the book carefully. The cover bore a simple title in crude lettering, The Guardian's Guide to Galactic Threats. Inside, page after page detailed various malevolent entities, rogue AI collectives, and parasitic species that had apparently been attempting to infiltrate, conquer, or consume the civilized galaxy. Each entry included weaknesses, tactical information, and last known coordinates. On the final page was a handwritten note. Dear Warden, and inevitably, Curious Officer Quasar. Consider this my parting gift. I've been collecting troublemakers for centuries, yes, centuries, but I can't be everywhere at once. The vortex was just the beginning. There are worse things coming. I'll be around when needed. In the meantime, consider establishing a proper prison for actual criminals. That station is far too nice to waste on a single occupant. Your friendly neighborhood monster. 0. With P.S. Dr. Starlight, you were right about the quantum displacement. Wrong about the method, though. It's not biological, it's something much older. Fletcher closed the book and looked at Danny. Make a copy of this. Then burn the original. Sir? More. Some things are too dangerous to know, Quasar. And some monsters, Fletcher paused, looking out the viewport at the infinite void beyond. Some monsters are necessary. Somewhere out in that darkness, riding a stolen Alliance shuttle toward unknown destinations, the being they'd known as Prisoner Zero smiled. The game was afoot once more, and the galaxy was full of very bad things that needed to be devoured. Or rather, relocated. Same difference, really.